So welcome everyone to Taking Back Birth with Children's Health Defence Canada. I'm your host, Kristen Nagle. So thank you very much everyone for being patient while we work out a time that works for both Adley and I. Normally the show is live, but tonight you'll notice that it's recording. So we're getting things sorted out that works for the both of us. But wanted to continue having these conversations. And last week we brought on three moms that had home birth experiences. Two were also former RNs, and a couple of them had experiences in the hospital as well as at home. So we thought we should bring on the men. So we have two joining us tonight, Herbert and Nick, and thank you very much for being here for this conversation to get the men's perspective.
Thanks for having us, Kristen.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here.
It's I just think it's so great because, you know, a lot around birth, as I'm sure you know, is focused on, you know, the women, all these supports before and after for the mother, but there really is nothing for the men. And you're very much a very important part of the process. You kind of make it all happen. So I think that's kind of where, like, start off is just your thoughts around it. So from my experience being a former NICU nurse, you know, I was once terrified of birth and the whole process from what I saw. And a lot of times when speaking with women, some of them would even say, you know, I wanted a home birth, but you know, my husband wasn't comfortable with it. My partner wasn't comfortable, and they wanted us to be in the hospital. You know, so they went to the hospital for their first experience. Was any of this your experience, Herbert? I don't think it was yours, but Nick, I'm not sure where you started off in this.
Yeah, so it was definitely my wife's desire to go the home birth route, and you know, I fully trust her. She does her diligence beyond and then some. But of course, my natural feeling in the back of my head was, well, doesn't a hospital provide the safest place for this to happen? Like, wouldn't you want to have all the medical professionals around in case anything happens? So I thought, if that's what, you want, let's make that happen. But it was a type of thing where, I thought, is a hospital not the best place to do this? And granted, that's many years ago when I had a very different perspective on things.
Mm-hmm. And Herbert, what about, so you were a little bit different with like 5 right away at home, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the first one, was not easy. We actually, interesting story, we almost gave up and went to the hospital because it just seemed like it was taking a long time. It was difficult. So it's not all just fun and games, right? I mean, birth never is, but some people kind of play this up, you'll be at home and everything will just be fine, right? And it wasn't. It was a tough slog, but we kind of my wife made that decision very early on, and together, we were both very much for that. We had similar experiences with our moms. Her mom had they were actually, my wife was born in the Soviet Union as German expats living in the Soviet Union. So they had a very, rough experience with the medical system, shall we say, her mom. So she was not happy. My mother it was my brother and I. So she had 2 negative experiences that both ended up in a C-section that, she felt at the time was completely unnecessary, but felt very pressured by the doctors to get into because, they needed to go home. There was those kind of, just factors like, well, let's just get this done. Like, this is what you need to do. So that influenced, I think, both of us when we got married and then started having children, was that's what we wanted to avoid. We didn't want a clinical birth experience. We wanted something that was holistic. At home, we saw the benefits, obviously, to mother and child when born at home on a health basis. So we wanted what was best for our baby, right? And I wanted what was best for my wife. And that's where we came to that decision.
Mm-hmm. And I think, like, with having, Nikki kind of alluded this to, like, a birth at home, you're very much kind of trusting the process. Like, you're trusting your wife, the mother, in her body, and, that she can do this. Like, did you have to let go of, fears going into birth? Like, did you have to work through fears? What was that for your first experience going into the home birth? Did you have to go through any process or work through anything like that?
Well, off the bat, my initial thought was like kind of terrified in that, okay, is it like, what's the support system going to look like? Is it just me? Obviously, there'll be a midwife with us. But originally or initially, I felt a little bit more, scared, but then as, when we went down the road of a home birth for our third and fourth, and you establish that a relationship with our midwife and our doula, I quickly learned, caught on that, hey, this is the way it should be, at least for us. This is the way we want it. And so those fears went away. And then, as the father and the man's role, part of my view is, it's his role to step into what is needed from his partner, and what the baby needs, what the unit needs, right? So at some point you got to pull up your slacks and put in the grunt work, and be present and be involved and get past those fears.
Mm-hmm. Herbert, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Well, Minik makes a good point. I think from my perspective, I think that's the father needs to go in to be there to do what needs to be done, right? It can be varied. It can change from minute to minute, right? It's just be adaptable. Like you said, put your big boy pants on and just be willing to do whatever needs to be done, right? And that can, it can take all kinds of interesting turns. Fears, yes, I had them. I would say I was confidently terrified going into the process. On one side, I was like, oh, I think this will work. And then the other side, like the next minute, I'd be like, oh, this could really, I hope this doesn't end badly. Like, where is this going to go, right? And so that's where that really, it was like a balance trying to find that. But you can just, you work through it and you figure out very quickly that there's nothing predictable about the process at large. Of course, there's a predictable, hopefully, ending, but things can come up and you just have to be very flexible and adaptable. And in the end, you're going to be the one that just steps in there to do whatever needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. I found with my first two, because again, being former NICU nurse and being super indoctrinated, I remember not doing any work. So I didn't look into anything, read anything. I was like, well, I've seen what births look like, working in that area. When, my time comes, I'm just going to go in, they'll tell me what to do, and, everything will be fine. Was unfortunately my mentality at the beginning. And, I think that was the same with, my husband. In that process, he would just come, he's like, just follow along with, what we're told to do. When we chose to have Adley at home, it was very different in that I had a lot of work to do. I had to unlearn a lot. I had to be comfortable. I had to be ready. I had to really know that I could trust my body, trust the people that, I invited into my space to support. And then I realized, my husband had to trust that process as well, and trust me. So I had to do a lot more work. At the time, I was just kind of talking through to my husband about things that were happening, things I was reading. And then I kept trying to give him books to read, and I'd get a little bit frustrated that he wasn't like reading or looking or doing any of this stuff. But when the time came, he knew exactly what to do instinctively, or just followed. Did you do any work to prepare yourself for this? Was it hard to let go of control and just trust in your partner at the beginning? I don't know who wants to take it. Sorry.
For me, I'll jump on that. We did a lot of work for the birth of our first, when we thought it was originally going to be a home birth. We went to, I think it was weekly classes in how to prepare for a home birth as a couple, lots of reading, all sorts of different books and whatnot. So yes, it definitely felt daunting and a little bit, like a lot of work. But we were so thankful we put in the work up front. So when, things really escalated with our situation, we just felt so much more cohesive and prepared as you can be, just strong mentally, having done that upfront work instead of just crossing your fingers and hope everything goes smooth. So, it was a little, just having to wrap your mind around all the upfront work, but wouldn't change for the world. Like doing that work up front really helped set us up for success.
Mm-hmm.
I found the same. We actually spent a lot of time. I'm a voracious reader, so that's kind of how I absorbed a lot of information. Was just I read a lot of books, blogs at the time, just different people with different experiences, like what works, what doesn't work, and then asking friends. We were fortunate to have a circle of friends that had already gone this route, so there was a comfortable reassurance from them, if you will, that this, you are making the right decision. This is going to be good. You'll be happy with it, and so that really helped. But I would say that we did put in a lot of work. We did classes, we did book reading, we did a lot of consultation with our doula and midwives. So that, I think that helped us. And even then, you can never be fully prepared for that first moment, at least from my perspective. You kind of go like, whoa, we thought it was a big deal, then you find it's a really big deal.
Yeah. Yes. A lot of the classes that are out there, so a lot of the prenatal classes and things like that, like I remember taking one with our first son, just because I wanted my husband to have that experience. Again, I was like, an ICU nurse, know this stuff. So ridiculous. So I was like, but I want you to kind of like learn this. But looking back now, I feel those prenatal classes, at least, the ones you take through the local health unit, are very much set up to almost groom you for a hospital experience, or, what to expect to get you ready for, the epidurals or the interventions or whatever might happen. Did you feel, Herb, I'll let you start this one, if you have experience with this, did you feel like was it the same kind of prenatal classes? I feel there's not really too many classes out there that set you up for a physiological birth experience at home.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So we actually did some like through alternative means, like other media, and so they were not so much in person, but attending, other, because I started digging into some of them, and I felt the word that you said before, I felt like they were setting us up to prepare for intervention. Constant. It would be, if this doesn't work out, then we're going to do this. If this doesn't work out, and I felt like their reassurance was just that, we got this. We'll have some kind of medical answer to everything that you're there. Without even, like, I felt like they were not trusting the process at all. And that's what the opposite. So we kind of tuned out of that very quickly, right? And went a different route, because we felt like, no, we want to do as much as we can without unnatural intervention, right? We're not, just constantly offering us intervention is not very reassuring. We're hoping that you have other means, like, this is going to happen, but that's okay, because then we'll just see, we'll give it a bit of time, we'll do this, this is no reason. But it was like the other way, like, this could happen, but then we'll just do this, we'll just do this, and we'll just do this. And it's like, well, that's not really what we're signing up for. We want an actual natural process to go along, because, I believe that we were created to make this work most of the time at home or in the natural setting. So let's try for that, and everything else should be a last resort, right? And that's where I was disappointed in any of the standard information or talks that we had with anybody. It was just, everything was always geared towards something that would destroy what we were trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Nick, did you have that same experience, or did you kind of seek out alternative means then, like the health units, or what are, normally advertised for us to take?
Yeah, I was going to say, so we did take, we did a prenatal, I guess, if you want to call it, program, but it's not one that you'll just find a flyer on, on the street walking downtown. It's, you kind of have to seek out the right folks in the holistic health, world, at least where we were living at the time. But the course we did take was very, just focused on a natural, home birth. What I do really value about it is that, you don't want to naturally think about it or have the plan for it, but it did set us up for, okay, let's talk about the reality. There's a potential that you may have to transfer. So let's talk about what to do in that situation. So when push came to shove during some of, our first two, at least our second, when some scenarios came up, I felt much more prepared to assess, okay, what are the risks? What if we do something? What if we do nothing? So fortunately, we had a very positive experience with our prenatal classes, but it was a more, done by a more holistic focused, woman, rather than here's the local hospital's prenatal course, which would have in my guess, a very different, look.
Mhm. So I think it'd be very important if you're looking for a physiological home birth is you do have to seek out alternative means to get that education.
Yes.
As we know, it's very hard to find it in, what's been advertised to us, what is mainstream, what is, the propaganda around birth. So you do have to do your own research and homework to find different programs or, learning opportunities where it is geared around actual physiological birth. One of the things I noticed from our experiences of having two in the hospital, with epidurals, the whole medicalized works versus our recent home birth is just my involvement with my husband. I found at the two hospital births, he came in, got me there, but, very quickly he's just at the head of the bed. And all these, other people are just there telling us what to do, and he's just listening, and they're kind of doing everything versus, being at home. I needed his support completely, and I don't think I would have had as a successful experience without him. I needed counter pressure on my back like the entire time. So for 6 hours, he was like just totally working my back and with me and very much involved in the whole process. And I felt a lot more, connected to him, that, he was very much a part of the birthing experience, as I was, versus at the hospital, just kind of being there. Did you feel more of a connection? Did you feel, Nick, I believe you were at the hospital for your first two, but not your second two. So I don't know, you're probably better to answer this. Did you notice a difference or have a deeper connection to your wife after?
Oh, night and day. So yeah, our very first child was emergency cesarean, so that was a different scenario. But even our second, who was born in a hospital, it was your, I don't know, the typical, quote unquote, typical experience, but, it was very much like what you described. You come in, you arrive, and then you're for the most part, a spectator. Obviously you're there supporting whatever your partner needs, but it feels like there's so many more other people involved trying to, are running things. Our home birth experience, it's a very intimate setting, something that you've prepared for, so you know what to expect, plan to do as the supporting husband. Just very, very close knit, just a much more connection or a much more connected feeling, and much more involved. I know exactly what you're talking about with the counter pressure. And yeah, it was just a much more wonderful experience being involved and being part of it, in a much more intimate, calm, wonderful setting.
Mm-hmm. And then did you feel a different connection with your baby afterwards, or even with your wife after being in, having been a part so much of the experience? Did you notice a difference afterwards?
Oh yeah, and my wife has said it over and over again, just the ability to lay in her own bed with our baby laying on her chest, me laying next to her, is something you just can't replicate outside of a home birth, in my opinion. There's just the incredible feeling of how quickly, a baby came out, and we were all one family unit together on the bed with no intervention, intentionally being left alone by our support system just to bond. That'll be a memory that will last forever. And I know, from a nurturing standpoint, that's what the baby needs to really start thriving. You just can't beat that, and you can't get that anywhere else, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Herbert, you don't have the different experience with hospital and home, but for your first experience, you said, it was tough because, you kind of know, but you don't really know till you're in it, what that first, natural birth is going to look like, feel like, and just the whole experience. What was that like for you to, witness your wife through the process? I'm always curious, like the first thing, afterwards I asked my husband, like, are you okay? Like, how was that for you? Watching someone you love like in pain go through that, and then, but afterwards, it hopefully ends happy. But so what was that process like for you, watching your wife through all the transitions and phases of labor leading up to birth?
I think what I find really important about it, and of course, the pain is all hers, but there's a lot of empathy and there's a lot of bonding that happens between us. We were so much closer after that because it was like, as much as could be possible, we shared it. You're right there. You're the ups, the downs, the pain, like you say, the back, the counter pressure, the back massages, maybe the little ice cube on the lips, or getting the shake, or, it's whatever she wants at that time or needs to make it as good as possible is to me, the entire experience becomes sacred when you can do it this way. It's like Nick just said too, the moment when it's really done, it feels like there's an indescribable, amazing feeling about that. It's like, here's our baby. We did this. We're here together. It's like, new life is brought into the world. God's right there. That's how we felt, because it's a spiritual moment, right? And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I understand there isn't always, like I said, it was really tough. Our first one went on for a long time, and we were new, and this was my wife's first time. So it's difficult to articulate, how bad are things, because you can't gauge against, the second baby. She's like, oh, this isn't nearly as bad as the first one. And then, you can compare the first one. You don't know, like, this is just a lot of pain. But what is a lot of pain, right? What is a normal, what is not normal progression, right? So ours took a long time. It was a matter of, it went over a matter of 2 days of tough, many hours in the night. And then it seemed like it just would back off and start again. And, and it was kind of these fits and starts. But when we're through it, it was so worth it. We have always said we would do it any other way if we could, because of that feeling that washes over you when it's done. Is like, we did this together. Is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that part was kind of unreal. Like, I remember, because I was induced and then I had epidurals, and I remember it was like, okay, you kind of are told to push, you're told what to do. Okay, baby's here. And I remember obviously you're so excited and in love with this baby. But I remember with my first two, the bonding was different. And that initial reaction, and obviously my husband's very excited. Here's, new baby, your first time dad, and all very beautiful. But I remember when Adley was born, it was just, I even had to have this moment, because it was just, so intense leading up to that. Then all of a sudden, it's gone. That's the part I'm still like, can't believe it's just gone instantly. You're awake, you're in love, you're like, just so happy. And I remember looking at her and just being like, oh my gosh, like, we did it. Like, we did that. My husband came over and he kissed me. He's like, like, you did that. And I was like, well, we did, like, your help too. And it was just this whole experience of just like gratitude and amazement and just an accomplishment. And I always remember seeing, like, when moms forget the baby and they cry. And I remember thinking, I was like, oh, I never really had that feeling with my boys. Very excited, but not that overwhelming, like, of emotion. And that's something that is indescribable, that overwhelming rush of emotion of, yes, like, we did that, and here you are. And I think that's like something really beautiful that a lot don't get to experience. And I think that's even very different for you as fathers. You get to have that experience too of, you did this and we did this and here it is. And I don't think you both kind of described that well. There's nothing really, I'm sure, that describes that feeling.
No, it's interesting that you mentioned the crying, because that's now when you said that, it came back to me. I think every time we had this, the baby's on mom, she's bonding. It's right there. Like, that was the first thing you did, lay down or sit wherever she wanted to be, but just, and, put the baby on, and we would look at each other and tears would just roll down our face. Not because we were angry or sad. It was just like an overwhelming, you didn't know, like, it had to just come out, right? It was like, it's here. What a miracle, right? is something that I'll always treasure that memory of those moments. Those first 15 minutes are just special, that you can't really replicate any other way in life. That experience,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really incredible. It's why I say, go from, I'm the, used to say home birth should be illegal, to like one of the biggest, biggest advocates in my whole like unlearning journey. Nick, I'm curious about this. So I read this book by Sheila Stubbs. She's actually local to Tillsonburg, huge birth advocate. She wrote a book called Birth the Easy Way, from someone who learned the hard way. So she first had an unwanted C-section, pushed by kind of medical interventions, to a VBAC in the hospital, and then she went on to have 4 more babies at home. And one of her favorite experiences ended up being with just her and her husband. That's it. Like that was their 5th baby, and she just loved it and said it was incredibly intimate and just this beautiful experience. So there's Marilyn Moran is a writer who she talks about. And it's a very interesting conversation trying to lead up to this because it's something I never thought about, whereas the birth is actually the fulfillment of literally planting a seed. So, it's the completion of an act. So of intercourse, seed's been planted, it grows, and here is literally the fruits, of the seed. And it was a weird kind of thought process. She writes it beautifully. And just thinking about that whole cycle of that 9 months. And I feel, and I don't know, I'm thinking from, my 2 hospital births to this one, and that completion, that like, holding your baby, the fruits is just this incredible experience that you get to witness at home. And I don't know if that's something I ever thought about. It's something I never did, but I was like, she says it a lot more articulate in the book. But I just think it's such a beautiful thing to witness. And one of the things that she kind of talked about was that it can deepen the relationship. So with like Sheila, she said her most favorite birth was just her and her husband. Totally deepen their relationship, very intimate, and even following the birth, just very intimate experience then compared to the hospital one. And I've thought about this since, especially, all the labors and deliveries I've seen, where the man's standing at the head of the hospital bed, and there's another man, between women's legs. Usually OBs are always men, and they're very much involved in that process while you're just standing there. And I've asked my husband this question too since, like, I don't know, how does that feel? I don't think it's anything we've ever thought about to ask, a man, a husband in that scenario. Like, how do we just accept it as normal? Does it feel strange? Like, I don't know. And then, sorry, my point after that too was some of these births that went kind of traumatically, not in a way that was expected, it actually put separation in the man and wife's relationship. That birth can actually, the process or how it happens can actually divide versus bringing together. So I don't know, Nick, sorry, I kind of went on a ramble there. I don't know if you have any like thoughts to that from, the hospital experience to home being, intimate to versus, that loss of control.
Oh, absolutely. At our second birth, where, there was the OB came in, and of course was the one who, like you mentioned, was the one standing between me and my wife. We had a very negative experience with him. It, gave us more so my wife some actual trauma after, just psychologically. In that, it was the opposite of what you want for your baby arriving into the world. And comparing that to me catching my own baby in a tub, in a just comfortable, warm, pleasant setting versus a bright hospital room with a bunch of people around staring and monitors going off. The level of intimacy and connection, has stuck with us in our relationship since then. And just having that, being able to talk about that, one-on-one. Hey, do you remember like you were doing this and this happened? So yeah, what she says is very true. I never really thought about it too much until you start talking about it, but there's definitely a big difference in the two experiences, in that going back, you're a spectator and somebody else is kind of running the show, and you're not on the same wavelength, and frankly, you're not doing the best you could do in terms of the OB versus, hey, I'm 2 feet away from you, catching our baby, and you're doing beautifully. Baby shows up beautifully. Like that's just a connection that will last, in my opinion, just forever.
Herbert, did you get to catch your babies?
3 out of 5. So what happened is anyway, things happen, and I think it was 2 of them was so quick. I was partially involved, but it was at that moment my wife needed me, and one of them was she was on all fours and just different position, and I was just by her head, just giving her a neck massage, and then it was like, here it comes. And at that moment, so it was my mom or me. But yeah, 3 out of 5. The last one especially, I remember that one very vividly. Was just a classic. My wife was one of those that her births get better as time goes on. So each one of them seemed to be more predictable and more, just less time. So the last one, I remember David was amazing. He just wriggled right into my arms, and it was so fast that it shocked me actually. And I'm almost embarrassed to say I almost lost grip of him because he was such a slithery little monkey. He was like active like for the first second. So I'm there just like fumbling, trying to make sure I don't lose him, because I just about did.
It's a very real thing. They're very slippery when they come out.
Yeah. I think that shocked me the most on the first one, was like, whoa, okay. Yeah, that you got to really keep tabs on him, because and especially, and David has never stopped being that way too. He's 2 now, so he never stopped. So he came out energetic, as it's never slowed down. But yeah, I just thinking back, this conversation is so interesting, because when you think back, memories awaken now of that time, and it's really sad that in our society so many people don't have that opportunity, because it really does change. I think as a dad, it changes you, like Nick said. From being a spectator to being the assistant is where a dad really should be.
And I think the same. I was saying the comparison with motherhood, when you reclaim your birth, when you go through that, you become very trusting in your body, because you're like, oh my gosh, like my body just did that, like I just did that, and here's our bodies are amazing, and then you become a lot more, I think, convicted in yourself, in knowing. And I think that kind of sets you up for being more trusting in how to raise your baby, or what your baby needs as well. I'm saying, a lot of the importance of this is then you take responsibility over your children instead of handing them over. All the baby visits, thinking, they need to go to all these babies and checkups, and, a doctor needs to tell you if your baby's okay, or, if they're growing, or, if they're eating enough. I think, from having, this experience, this birth, it's like, oh my gosh, like if I can do that, you feel very convicted in yourself and very responsible. And it's like, you feel more connected to your baby. And it's like, no, I know what my baby needs. If we can do this, I know their bodies know what it needs. And I think it sets you up to be a more confident parent. This is just my kind of assumptions and how I feel. I don't know if either of you can relate, or what you think of that as a father on this side too. If you become more confident and convicted in your father abilities, fathering.
Well, I think it's very empowering. Like I watched that in my wife, and for me, that and it's not a reckless empowerment, but like you said, it's a confidence and an empowerment that, you know what, there is another way, right? And we can take charge, and not in not at all, endangering health of mother or child, but like my wife going through those processes became very empowered. Mom, as a woman, that she did this, and there's a process that she was there, she went through it, it completed. I was there with her, and you really, like you said, you take charge of your children's, take charge and responsibility for your children and their future, rather than subbing it out to someone else that really knows almost nothing about your circumstances. Maybe a quick rudimentary visit every 30 days or something. They don't even really know them. And it allowed us to take back and charge of the health and well-being of our children, which I believe was to their advantage. I believe that to this day that they have been, that it was a blessing for them, that they've been better off, that we were able through that. I'm not saying we did everything ourselves, but we have been able to provide them better care because we were there right from the beginning through the whole process. And we've watched every bit of that process very, very carefully.
Yeah, totally agree with Herbert. From, I think, the moment you decide that, hey, we're going to do a home birth, to that baby laying on your chest and you realize, hey, we are able to do hard things. We're capable ourselves of trusting ourselves. That's just lighting the fuse that you can carry with you as a man, as a mother, a woman, and as a couple from there forth on, right? Hey, we did this together. We can get through, we can do things, we can do hard things. My wife wears a t-shirt at least, I think, once a week that says, we can do hard things. Because, that level of confidence and that meaningfulness that you get from experiencing that, that's something that stays with you forever, and really drives that notion that, hey, I'm capable, trust myself to be able to listen to what our kids need and know what our kids need and each other need, and it just sets you up for a real long-term success.
I think, Nick, one thing that you touch on there with that is that it's so easy in our society that everything is subbed out to somebody else. That's education is, the teacher's responsibility, healthcare is this professional's responsibility. And we become sort of selfish maybe sometimes that way as a society, and everybody, you just do the fun things together, and everything that's slightly complicated, somebody else has to solve for you, right? And when you actually go through a process where you're solving difficult things, and it's not just birth isn't just a solution, but you are actually going through together, you spend a lot more time. We have invested much more time in that process than the average regular, hospital medical interventionist birth would entail. Typically, there's not that much you have to prepare for because, they take care of it all. So, we obviously want to be prepared. So we spend far more time in all of the births preparing for contingencies, changes. Will we have this on hand, stocking up, buying supplies, getting, making sure that, sometimes I think home birth advocates are painted as like weird, kooky, careless people that just don't want to go to a hospital. And it's exactly the opposite from my experience, that we care so much that we put in our own time, our own money, and invest in that process. And to me, that's a huge distinction. I would argue that people like yourself, Nick, and our family, Kristen, your family, we have invested a net amount, probably 10 to 20 times what anybody else does that goes through a regular, status quo, big pharma birth process.
Yeah, I'd definitely say the same. I think some, a lot of people take comfort in just leaving it up to the professionals who are the best suited to do it in if that's what they believe, or that's just kind of the mainstream thought. But it's one of those cases where it's easier to do less, but that's not necessarily, it's not a philosophy we align with, and doesn't sound like it's one y'all align with either. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. The research is so important. Like I said, how my first experience was, I don't need to read anything. I'm just going to go let them tell me. And then this time was like overwhelming. Like I couldn't get enough information. So the idea of not being educated. Oh, I think I lost you guys.
I can hear you.
Yeah, I could hear you the whole time.
I think so. Are you back? Okay. Yep. Oh, could you? Okay, just the screen froze. Okay. So the idea of not being educated is just so not true. You become more educated and more well-versed because you care so much about the health and well-being of your baby and yourself. Like you're so invested in this baby's health. So the idea of, you hear that a lot, like, oh, you're just selfish. You only care about your needs. That's why you're doing this, and it's like, couldn't be further from the truth, because you've put in so much time and work and energy in learning what is the best outcome for your baby. And so I think that is a really important thing to kind of to squash. To debunk, is the uneducated part. Audley's up, but I have a couple more questions. She's good right now. So, and if you think of anything else that I should, or you could add, let me know. I tried to do a little survey of people of questions that they wanted to know. And definitely an important one is, if you're talking to, a dad, about to be dad, what is, some advice you would like to give him if, they're considering home birth, or he thinks, they should be in the hospital. Nick, we'll start with you. What is some advice you'd like to give a new dad in this journey?
If it's something you think you want, you are capable of it. Even if from the start it's daunting, everybody is capable of taking this into their own hands and putting in the work to, the reading and the classes and anything. It's scary at first, yes, but the reward you get out of it is a million times more worth it. So I know that's kind of vague, very generic, but off the bat, that's, if you're hesitant about it, it's definitely something that anybody can do if they're willing to, if it's truly what they want and they're willing to put in the effort to make it happen. I was in a similar boat of being a little bit overwhelmed by it, but oh my God, I'm so glad we went down the road of home birth, because I wouldn't want it any other way.
Mm-hmm.
I would say two things. One is, be willing to invest in the time and effort that it needs to educate yourself. Don't let that be your wife and say, well, she'll tell me what is happening. No. Really, if you're going to do this at home, you need to do it together. So put the time and effort in. I know men like to often, just kind of sail through it and see what happens. No, get serious about it, because this is your baby. So take the time that you need to get it done well. And then second of all, I think men a lot of times like to provide solutions for problems, and in the birth process, everything seems like a problem, because it's not really good until it's done, right? There's pain, there's suffering, and things happen, and there's tension, because as it builds towards that moment, is just be there and be very adaptive. The better you know your wife through that process, and that's why investing time in that birthing process, get to know your wife as good as you possibly can, so that you can be there, not to provide solutions that you think are necessary, but to react as quickly as possible to what she needs, and just unequivocally do what she needs you to do. That I think is super important. Don't go in there thinking like, I think this is what she needs. No, just give her what she wants, and things go much smoother, much easier.
Yes. And then if they, say, a lot of times you hear people say like, well, what if something goes wrong? What would be your answers you would have? Herbert, I'll start with you. I'm sure you heard that. I don't know if you heard that a lot as well.
Oh, a lot. And yes. Our first one almost went wrong. Like we weren't sure. It wasn't looking great. But that's where I would tell the dads, that's where you now need to be a rock. Don't be a panic. You cannot panic. You have to be the solid, stable force in that room, because your wife needs to be able to focus on what is going on. All right. And you have to be there to be the reassuring, and maybe, you need to consult with your support group that's there, if you're doing it with others, doulas, midwives, or whatever. But you got to really step up to the plate on that one. Don't panic. Don't freak out. Just be a solid rock right there. You need to just focus. If things could go wrong, then, think of your plan B. That's why it's good to, discuss a birth plan. Is there a point when, if this happens, we're going to do this? Kind of think through those scenarios. And that way you can reach a point and say, okay, well, this is what we discussed. So this is what we're going to do, because your wife may not be in a position to have a long discussion about what we want to do now. You'll need to make a decision that she was comfortable with and is comfortable with, and move on through that. That was my experience. We didn't ultimately have to go all the way to the worst case scenario, but we went awfully close. And that always stuck with me, that I realized that I was not over prepared. You cannot over prepare. Just get through it, do it ahead of time. How do you feel? Are you ready for this next step, or do you want to wait? And if she says wait, then wait and just see. But you need to be ready and there to make those, not make decisions for her, don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is you need to be able to step in and fill that gap, because it depends on, what her emotional, physical condition is at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Herbert's exactly right. And going back to the birth plan is you whether you may or may not have a midwife, a doula, you and your partner, your wife, your significant other should have a plan in place to say, A, B, C, D, E. Here's the potential outcomes. Let's talk about these up front, well before the birth. So if that does happen, you're not freaking out on the spot, trying to ask her, and she's not in a position to really coherently give you feedback or advice. It's like, this is happening. Oh, it's on our list that this is what we plan for. This is what we're going to do. And the decision is really kind of made for you already. And you're not that panicking, man, you're like Herbert said, you're a solid rock, and you just create that as safe as possible haven for mom and for baby.
Mm-hmm. I should have asked at the start, did either of you get a lot of pushback for your decision about being at home? Because that is huge still in our society. Was it difficult? Any pushback in your decisions?
We had not pushback, but more curiosity, like on the line of pushback, like, why would you want to go do that? Or like, just really, why would you want to go that route? And we were pretty confident in what we had planned, and that didn't really waver us whatsoever. And just the amount of kind of research put into it is, hey, anything you're going to try to throw at me,
I'm prepared. I'm prepared with an answer.
We have a response for that. So
it was very similar for us. There was a little bit of, nothing in our immediate family, thankfully, because her family and my family, both parents were totally on board with it because of their prior experiences. Their experiences kind of shaped our decision. But, extended family, there was other friends, acquaintances that were kind of like, what? Like at home? Like, what if something happens, right? But like Nick said, I did a lot of research, and I think I may have even convinced others to decide that maybe they were the crazy ones, not me. Because I went they started talking, I'd be like, here, read this. This is 600 pages of evidence and exhibits I can exhibit, I can present to a court if needed be, because I know that this is the right decision for what we're doing. And people kind of go like, oh, okay, I didn't know that, right? So it was mostly positive. And I think as for us having a number at home, like by baby 2 and 3, there was like nobody in our circle ever even questioned it. Not only that, other people said, you inspired us to try this as well, because they just saw, you cannot, I tell them all the time, the moment that baby is born and you're at home, you are so grateful that there is no, trying to figure out when do you get sent home, who packages up what or whatever, like in our bed right there, done. Like that's
no
it.
Interrupting.
Everybody else was home.
Coming in. Yeah.
We're staying right here. Right. So it's like perfect. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we tell them, oh yeah, I'd ask my wife, would you like, well, if someone's, if one of the people could stay for another hour just to make sure, maybe she wanted a bath or something like that, different things. Or my mom would stay. She was usually there to help because she does this on a doula basis. So it was that, and so it would just be, hey, Julia, call the shots. Who do you want in the room? Who don't you want in the room? Where would you like to go sit down, lay down? What do you want to do? You're home, right? You're automatically the queen of this place. Yeah. Versus having, to us at that moment, we were always like, oh, I'm so glad this worked because we're right in our haven.
Mm-hmm. That was interesting way you put that, like queen of this place. And that was, someone else brought that up, like the territory. When you step into a hospital, you're in someone else's territory and you tend to kind of, cater to someone else's territory. You're not as confident in things you would say or do. Whereas when it's your home, it is your space, your home, your rules, and you're more adapt to, stating, your needs versus trying to accommodate other people and, and what they think you should do. It makes a huge difference in the space you're in, whose territory you're stepping into. Is it someone else's or is it yours? And I think that makes a whole difference in the experience as well.
Absolutely. For us, it was huge because, like at times, in the intervals in the birth, she'd be like, could everybody just leave the room? It's just, I just want my husband here. That's it. Right. Or just, so just the two of us, maybe for an hour or two. Right.
People listen because they're like, oh, okay. It's your house.
It's your house. Hey, just go in the living room, have some lunch, do something else. We just want some time, it's whatever she wants. Right. And it can be done, in 10 seconds, everybody's out, gone. Right. Mm-hmm. Oh, she wants them back in, mom, can you come? Or can, the other person come? She wants you here now. And it's catering to the person that needs to be catered to. Mm-hmm. That's it. She doesn't have to perform for anybody. She's at home. You can put on clothes, take them off, do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. She rules, right? And that's the whole point. She's the one giving birth. So why isn't that exactly what it should be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
Sorry, I was just going to say anything about the territory thing. Yeah. Going back again to the second birth. It felt very territorial in the hospital in that when the OB came in, they were rude and didn't present themselves, didn't introduce themselves, they were very annoyed how far along my wife was before she came in, and that set a very poor tone for the rest of the experience. Fast forward a couple hours, baby's out and healthy and happy. Everything went smooth, and we're like, hey, can we go home? We're good. Baby's good. Mommy's thriving. Everyone's good. And they're trying to come up with reasons to just keep us there. And we said, well, we've got a full support team at home. We got everything we need. We were able to get out of there, I think about 4 hours after we arrived or something like that, or 4 hours after births, one or the other. But they wanted to keep us there longer. And
like punishment for not following their rules or doing what they wanted you to do.
Exactly. And we said, hey, if we were doing a home birth, we'd be home. We wouldn't have you guys here. So to what her was saying, as soon as baby comes out, on our territory, it's our schedule, and we're calling the shots. And that's what our support team understood. It's like, hey, we are here for you, whatever you need, not the other way around. And just, totally different feeling when it comes to who's calling the shots, whose territory it is, and what your role is. It's you're part of it. You're not a spectator of it.
It was huge. Like I remember, especially we were lucky with our first son. We had a private room. Second one, we had to share a room. My husband, squished on little hospital chairs, the bed, and all this stuff. And I with Adley, once everyone left, I remember I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get up and have a shower. Came back to a clean bed, and in that time, my husband was doing skin to skin in the bed, comfortable, holding her. And we just said, can you believe that we're in our bed right now? Especially when everyone left, when everything was ready, and everyone, we were ready for, we were up all night, so we were ready for some rest. And we just looked at each other. We're like, oh my gosh, we don't have to go anywhere. We're our kitchen is here. There's food here. We just get to relax, together, in the comforts of our home. That was, priceless, just amazing. Coming from the two experiences. I remember he had to leave the hospital, try and find food, come back, the little chair and whatever. But it was oh my gosh, here we are together, at home, everything's here and we're comfortable. And, he was comfortable doing skin to skin and in the bed, and just unbelievable difference. I thank you both for coming on. Thank you for your patience and working with me and Adley during this. Is there any final notes? I know that someone was curious. They put up a question of wanting to know your favorite part of birth. So I think we could probably wrap up and end on that note. Herbert, I'll start with you. Your favorite part of birth.
Together, 5 minutes after the baby's born, you can't replicate it. It's just like you said, we would take turns bonding skin to skin. Those are experiences that I'll never forget. Right at that moment, everything's worth everything that you went through. And it's amazing how quickly that becomes a distant memory as you bask in that moment.
Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, Nick.
Oh, that's tough. Just watching just the incredible feeling, emotion, power, empowerment. Watching that happen on my wife as I'm catching the baby, she's passing the baby, or I'm passing the baby to her, and she's just holding. She likes to say every birth, like, welcome Earthside, and it's just seeing the welcome Earthside, little one, and just seeing that transformation, just that empowerment, that emotion that that gave my wife, is like just one of the biggest memories of my life, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing she got exactly what she wanted for her birth experience, and I got the most just incredible experience myself. Yeah, that was definitely it for me.
Mm-hmm. No, it's beautifully said. So great conversation with two dads and their home birth experience. Obviously, home birth advocates, wouldn't have it any other way. Anything else you guys want to end with that you would like to share that maybe we didn't touch on that you think is important?
Just trying to go through a few notes I brought together. No, I guess I'd just say, as a dad who, originally thought, oh, a hospital birth is the best way to do this, safest way, to 4 kids later, I would never have it any other way but a home birth if I could. Just the most wonderful experience, and I'm a huge advocate for it, for sure.
Awesome.
And I would say to any dads out there, if you're in this, you're contemplating, and your wife is saying, I think we should, be her biggest supporter. Just go. She knows what's good for her. She knows what's right. And just don't don't inject the fear into the process. Just embrace it entirely. And it is worth it. Educate yourself, put the time in, and you will find that rewarding and very empowering.
Mm-hmm. That's beautifully said. Well, thank you guys again so much. And to all those listening, one of the things I just recently learned, saying, if you are considering a home birth and, someone tells you, oh, you're brave, the next time someone tells you that they're having a hospital birth, you can tell them that they're brave and throw it back. Well, thank you guys very much. I'm going to try and do the little exit here, and I'm sure we'll continue these conversations again, and just very nice for you guys to come on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kristen, for having me.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Kristen.
Bye. Bear with me. I'm not good at this. All right. See you guys.